I now call the Deputy Prime Minister to make a statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And before I begin my statement, I know the whole House will join me in sending our deepest condolences and strength in the hours ahead to those affected by yesterday's shocking incident in Southport. And as a mother and grandmother, I can't even begin to imagine the depth of pain and suffering of those involved. And I'd like to echo the words of the Honourable Member for Southport in thanking the police and the emergency services for their swift response. And our thoughts and prayers with those who have already sadly lost loved ones and are now fighting for their lives as well. Mr Speaker, with your permission, I've come to the House to make a statement about this government's plan to get Britain building. Delivering economic growth is our #1 mission. It's how we'll raise living standards for everyone, everywhere. The only way we can fix our public services. So today I am setting out a radical plan to not only get the homes we desperately need, but also drive the growth, create jobs and breathe life back into towns and cities. We are ambitious, and what I say won't be without controversy, but this is urgent. Because this Labour government is not afraid to take on the tough choices needed to deliver for our country. Mr Speaker, we're facing the most acute housing crisis in living memory. 150,000 children in temporary accommodation, nearly 1.3 million households on social housing waiting lists. Under 30s less than half as likely to own their own home compared to in the 1990s. Rents are up 8.6% in the last year, total homelessness at record levels. There are simply not enough homes. Those on the benches opposite knew this, but what did they do for 14 years? As my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, said yesterday, they ducked the difficult decisions, they put party before country. They pulled the wool over people's eyes by crowing about getting 1 million new homes in this last Parliament. But they failed to get anywhere near their target of 300,000 homes a year. And in a bid to appease their anti-housing backbenchers, they made housing targets only advisable. They knew that this would tank housing supply, but they still did it. And as I stand here today, I can now reveal the result. That the number of new homes is now likely to drop below 200,000 this year. Unforgivable. This legacy makes our job all the harder, but it also makes it so much more urgent. So today, I'll explain how Labour will deliver the change needed to turbocharge growth and build more homes. And I'll start with housing targets. Decisions about what to build should reflect local views, but that should be about how to deliver new homes, not whether to. Whilst the previous government watered down housing targets, caving into their anti-growth backbenchers, this Labour government is taking the tough choices, putting people and country first. For the first time, we'll make local housing targets mandatory, requiring local authorities to use the same method to work out how many homes to build. But, Mr Speaker, that alone is insufficient to meet our ambition. So we're also changing the standard method used to calculate housing need, so it better reflects the urgency of supply for local areas. Rather than relying on outdated data, this new method will require local authorities to plan for homes proportionate to the size of existing communities. And it will incorporate an uplift where house prices are most out of step with local incomes. The collective total of these local targets will therefore rise from some 300,000 a year to just over 370,000 a year. Now, some will find this uncomfortable, and others will try and poke holes. So I'll tackle the 4 arguments head on. First, that we're demanding too much from some places. To this I say, we have a housing crisis and a mandate for real change, and we all must play our part. Second, that some areas might appear to get a surprising target. But, Mr Speaker, no method is perfect, and the old one produced all sorts of odd outcomes. Crucially, ours offers extra stability for local authorities. Third, that we are lowering our ambition for London. I'm clear we're doing no such thing. That London had a nominal target of almost 100,000 homes a year based on an arbitrary uplift was absolute nonsense. The adoption of the London Plan has a target of around 52,000, and delivery in London last year was around 35,000. The target we're now setting for London, roughly 80,000, is still a huge ask. But I know it's one that the Mayor is determined to rise to, and I met with him last week about this. Fourth, some will say a total of 370,000 is not enough. To this I say, ambition is critical, but we also need to be realistic. I want to now move to the Greenbelt. If we have targets for what we need to build, we next need to ensure we're building in the right places. The first port of call must be brownfield land. We are making some changes today to support this, but it's only part of the answer, Mr Speaker. This is why we must create more strategic system for Greenbelt release to make it work for the 21st century. Local authorities will have to review their Greenbelt if needed to meet housing targets, but they'll also need to prioritise low-quality grey belt land, for which we are setting out a definition today. And where land in the Greenbelt is developed, new golden rules will require provision of 50% affordable housing, with a focus on social rent, as well as schools, GP surgeries and transport links that community need, and improvements to accessible green space. And let's not forget, Mr Speaker, that it was the previous government's haphazard approach to building on the Greenbelt that has seen so many of the wrong homes built in the wrong places without local services that people need. Under Labour, this will change. Now, Mr Speaker, increasing supply is of course essential to improving affordability, but we must also go further in building genuinely affordable homes. And part of this must come from developers. And the Housing Minister will be meeting with major developers later to ensure that they commit to matching our pace of reform. But an active mission-led government must also play its role. This is why today I'm calling on local authorities, housing associations and industry to work with me to deliver a council house revolution. Yeah. Mr Speaker, this isn't just a nice add-on. It is vital to getting the 1.5 million homes built, because we know that schemes with a large amount of affordable housing are likely to be completed faster. And injecting confidence and certainty into social housing is how we get Britain back to building. The previous government had to downgrade the number of new homes their affordable housing programme would deliver. And now today, I can unveil that not only between 110,000 and 130,000 affordable homes are due to be built under this programme, down from their original target of 180,000. In our worst case scenario, some 70,000 fewer families in need of a secure home will lose out, Mr Speaker. How have they let that happen? And once again, it's this government which will have to pick up the pieces. This is why today I'm announcing immediate steps for the biggest boost to social and affordable housing in a generation. Yeah. We will introduce more flexibilities in current affordable homes programme working with Homes England, and will bring forward details of future government investment at the spending review. I also recognise that councils and housing associations need support too. So my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will set out plans at the next fiscal event to give them the rent stability that they need to borrow and invest. But, Mr Speaker, we must also maintain existing stock, which is why I'm announcing important changes to the right to buy. We have already started reviewing the increased right to buy discounts introduced in 2012 and will consult in the autumn on wider reforms to right to buy. And we are immediately increasing flexibilities for councils when using right to buy receipts. And in addition to help councils provide homes for some of the most vulnerable in society, I can also confirm today that the £450 million of the Local Authority Housing Fund will flow to them to provide 2,000 new homes. This is what Labour does. Mr. Speaker, these reforms are key to realising our wider growth ambitions. Part of that comes from new homes themselves, releasing untapped potential of our towns and cities that for too long have been throttled by the insufficient and unaffordable housing. But it also flows from making it easier to build the infrastructure on which we rely. So we're making it easier to build laboratories, gigafactories, data centres and electricity grid connections. And we must make it simpler and faster to build the clean energy sources needed to meet zero carbon energy generation by 2030. We've already ended the de facto ban on onshore wind, but we're also proposing to bring large onshore wind projects back to the nationally significant infrastructure projects regime, NSIP, change the threshold for solar development to reflect the developments in solar technology, and set a stronger expectation that authorities identify sites for renewable energy. To deliver all of this, we need every local authority to have a development plan in place. Up-to-date local plans are essential to ensuring that communities have a say in how development happens. Areas with a local plan are less vulnerable to speculative developments through appeals, and yet just a third of places have one that is under 5 years old. This must change. We will therefore fix this by ending constant changes and disruption to planning policy, setting clear expectations of universal local plan coverage and stepping in directly where local authorities let residents down. Local plans ensure local engagement and are critical to making development that have local people's needs met. But in demanding more of others, we're also going to demand more of ourselves. 2 weeks ago, I said that I will not hesitate to review an application where the potential economic gain warrants it. So today, I can confirm that ministers and I will mark our homework in public, reporting against the 13-week target for turning around ministerial decisions. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know what I've said seems a lot, but this is only the first step. We plan to do so much more. We'll introduce a planning and infrastructure bill that will reform planning committees so that they focus on the right applications with the necessary expertise, further reform compulsory purchase compensation rules so that what is paid to landowners is fair but not excessive, enable local authorities to put their planning departments on sustainable footings, streamline the delivery process for critical infrastructure and provide any legal underpinning that may be needed to ensure that nature recovery and building works hand in hand. We'll also take the steps needed for universal coverage of strategic planning within this Parliament, which we will work with local leaders to develop and formalise in legislation. And shortly, we'll say more about our plan for the next generation of new towns. And because we know that this crisis cannot be fixed overnight, in the coming months, the Government will publish a long-term housing strategy for how we will transform the housing market so it delivers for working people. These are the right reforms for the decade of renewal the country so desperately needs, and we will not be deterred by those who seek to stand in the way of our country's future. The honourable members opposite may say this cannot be done, but I say that once again, I'll prove them wrong. This government will build 1.5 million homes that are high quality, well designed and sustainable. We will achieve the biggest boost to affordable housing for a generation. And we will get Britain building to spur the growth that we need. And I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Shadow Secretary of State just to say, if you could name between 7 and 8 minutes. Just up to you. Shadow Secretary of State, Kemi Bennell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I echo the Right Honourable Lady's comments regarding the appalling incident in Southport? We on this side of the House send our deepest condolences to the families of all of those who are impacted. Mr. Speaker, having listened to her statement, I have many questions. I know that the Right Honourable Lady won't be able to answer all of them, certainly not in the time that we have today. So I hope that for those questions that she doesn't have the answer to now, she'll be able to provide written answers within a month and before the end of the summer recess, so that we can pick up quickly when we return for her department's oral questions in the next parliamentary term. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party has a mandate to deliver what they promised in their manifesto. As a party which has governed for most of the last 100 years, we respect that mandate, and it is our job, as His Majesty's loyal opposition, to scrutinise their plans and ensure that Labour are saying what they mean and, more importantly, doing what they say. But with that right to deliver their manifesto come many responsibilities. Labour now have a responsibility, unlike in a manifesto, they have a responsibility to be crystal clear about what they actually want to do to avoid prolonged uncertainty. They now have a responsibility to understand and address the concerns of councillors and local residents. They now have a responsibility to explain the economics and allocate the funding, which we all know will be needed for this plan. And they now have a responsibility not to be contradictory in what they are setting out. So they mustn't make promises which any impartial observer knows can't be delivered. And crucially, they mustn't break their commitments early. And yet, Mr. Speaker, we are already seeing changes to what they committed to. On the 20th of June, the Chancellor stated that they would update the MPPF within 100 days. So why is Labour now briefing that it will be before the end of the year? That's a lot more than 100 days. They've just started, they're already changing their targets. So will the Right Honourable Lady confirm that the MPPF will be updated and in effect by mid-October, the deadline that they set for themselves? They are proposing an 8-week consultation over summer holidays for their updates to the MPPF. This is the third set of updates that we will now have in a year. In the previous consultation on the MPPF in 2023, we had 2,600 responses. How will they have a meaningful consultation, which is what the legislation requires, that respects the input of local planning authorities and others? There will be legal challenges. Are they ready for them? They are proposing multiple changes to planning, the MPPF update, new primary legislation, the Honourable Lady just described, changes to nutrient neutrality, which they've recently converted to, and the NSIP, just to name a few. So the Right Honourable Lady says she wants to end constant changes and disruption to planning policy. That's great, but how is she going to avoid creating years of uncertainty and making it harder for local authorities and developers to build new housing, as all of these changes are worked through? As I said to her the last time we sat opposite each other, these things do take time, and these things are not as straightforward as she is laying out. The government will not be able to deliver its ambitions unless it recognises that. But what is most interesting in this statement, Mr. Speaker, is that she confirms that she is reducing the housing need calculation for London. Can she confirm if that reduction will apply to other urban areas? And can she explain why she is reducing the need for cities like London to build more housing when they are the ones who have the infrastructure to support it? Why is she forcing suburban and rural areas to take more housing when there are schools in Hackney, like de Beauvoir Primary School and Randall Creamer Primary School, that are shutting down because they don't have enough pupils? Why is she doing that? The government is talking about the grey belt in the planning framework. It's very interesting. I've had a quick look through. They define it, but what limited contribution to the 5 green belt purposes actually means in planning terms. What does that actually mean? Because if they're not clear, planning inspectors will determine that, and we will yet again have more and more local opposition. It is also interesting, Mr. Speaker, that the government is considering changes to restrict the right to buy. The Right Honourable Lady has told us very proudly how she was able to buy her own council house. Can she, at least one certainly, can she confirm to us that following these changes, young people across England will still be able to exercise the same right to buy that she herself had in 2007? Mr. Speaker, there is also a responsibility to address the concerns of councillors and local residents. I know from my own constituency the references that they have to traveller sites will cause some concern. The fact that she has stood up and said many many of the housing allocations will be surprising. This is very difficult for local councils and local communities to deal with. Where is the respect for local decision-making? We're not saying that they shouldn't be ambitious, but they're going to have to take local government in hand when they do this. They say they want to impose exacting mandatory housing targets on local authorities. When we had the advisory target, it was so that councils could make sure that they could do better, not do worse. So it is wrong for her to claim that this was us removing mandatory housing targets. Councillors have repeatedly told me that they are afraid that they will be forced, under a duty to cooperate, to sacrifice their own green spaces to take the housing need that the urban leaders who are her friends fail to meet. So what's she going to say to reassure leaders in places like Bromsgrove, Wychavon and South Staffordshire? And what penalties will she apply to local leaders like Sadiq Khan who fail to meet their housing need requirements? What happens when the mayor fails to meet even these reduced targets that she has set for him? She's already let slip that she is ditching the requirement to ensure that beauty is a key part of housing, something that I was actually very proud that the previous Conservative government put at the heart of our planning reforms, because local people do want beautiful housings. So now she's telling us that she's going to be replacing what they want with a requirement to meet 1.5 million ugly houses instead. Why on earth would they take out something? Why on earth would they take out something which means so much to local communities? People deserve to live in beautiful homes, and the fact that the Labour Party doesn't care about that shows exactly how they're going to develop their policies. Their responsibility to explain the economics and set out how they will fund their proposals is also quite key. They need to ensure that the MPPF has a new growth-based approach, they say, but that's already in the MPPF. She would know if she had read it. I bet she hasn't. The Chancellor effectively killed off some major NSIP schemes on Monday, like the Arundel bypass. Is there all this talk of prioritising infrastructure, energy projects, just a way of dressing up cuts to other kinds of infrastructure? Where is the economic analysis that her department has undertaken on the housing market? Yesterday, we all saw the Chancellor come to the dispatch box, claim not to have understood the pressure on public finances and how it was all so difficult. We warned repeatedly during the election. They say one thing and they do another. They said they weren't going to raise taxes. Now we can see what they're planning. But the Chancellor did not say anything about the impact on housing. So now I'm asking the Right Honourable Lady, on behalf of the British people and local authorities, what it means for them. Is she going to follow the same playbook, pretend she didn't know what it costs to build affordable housing, or to change the planning system and impose more costs for builders, home buyers and renters? These are just a few of the questions that the government will need to answer, and I'm sure colleagues across this House will have many more questions for them. But the government is in danger of choosing the worst of all worlds, not addressing basic economics of house building, centralising decision-making, and when you look at all that, it looks like the 1.5 million homes will be a distant aspiration rather than a meaningful target. Thank you.
Well, let me start by welcoming the Right Honourable Lady to her place, and can I wish her luck for her leadership campaign now she's confirmed she's running.
The best of luck.
So it was her ambition all along to be leader of the opposition, not mine. I must say, the Honourable Lady seems to be taking to opposition very naturally. I think she'll find herself comfortable for a long, long time on those benches. I mean, the Right Honourable Lady had a lot to say in her response, and I'll come to the substance of it in a moment. And I know that the Right Honourable Lady's already put quite a few written questions in, and I look forward to many more from her once she's had a chance to read and digest her brief after the election. But it felt like there was a couple of things I'm not quite sure she understood. Firstly, and this is critical, the British people kicked them out of office in a landslide victory. And secondly, why was that? So let me just remind her, the government in which she served has left us to clear up the mess. They crashed the economy and trashed our public services. They bankrupted Britain and they covered it up. They knew that they threw the book at the doctors and then they doctored the books. She keeps speaking about the Tories' record on housing, but I'll remind her again, year after year, the Tories failed to keep their housing targets. She speaks about the Mayor of London with their bizarre figures that they set for the Mayor. Every single year, the Conservative government failed to meet their own target, talking of promises that they can't keep. I'll come to the Right Honourable Lady's question on the MPPF consultation. It starts today, Madam Deputy Speaker, for 8 weeks, and we're asking people to engage. It's an incredibly detailed consultation because we mean business, and it wouldn't come to any surprise that the work needed to be done after the disaster of the last Tory government that ripped up the National Planning Policy Framework and made a right mess of it. The former Tory Secretary of State handed back 1.9 billion of vital funds. The Right Honourable Lady talked about the Affordable Homes grant. The last Secretary of State handed back 1.9 billion funds to the Treasury. So we will be making it more flexible, working with Homes England to get the homes that we need. The party opposite...
You're just reading. You're supposed to be answering the questions.
They are the questions.
For you to read.
No, they're the bits I've written, actually, in regards to her questions. The party opposite is now talking to themselves and not the country. And they talk about, and the Right Honourable Lady mentioned chaos and uncertainty. I really don't know how they can say that with a straight face after the chaos and uncertainty we've had. Countless housing secretaries not knowing what was going on. And there is increases, Madam Deputy Speaker, in answer to the question. In every inner city area, there is increases in the targets. And can I remind honourable members that we inherited the most acute housing crisis in living memory. And I say to the Right Honourable Lady, the Green Belt definition is in the consultation. I suggest she reads it. And it also tackles beautiful homes, Madam Deputy Speaker, because we will build homes at scale. They will be beautiful. We'll protect the natural environment. We will make sure that people have the homes that they deserve and that they need. And I come to the point the Right Honourable Lady made about councils and representing council leaders. I find that astonishing because the council leaders that I've spoke to were absolutely overjoyous with the fact that the Tories were kicked out, because the council leaders say to me that they have been left with a dire situation, an absolute dire situation. I know the members opposite like to think it's just Labour councils, but councils across the whole political spectrum have been left in a disaster situation because the party opposite did not build the homes that people need. We have a homelessness crisis in this country. We have a crisis where people under the age of 30 cannot get homes now. It is impossible for people to get on the housing ladder. That is the failure of the last Conservative government. That is what we're going to fix, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's what we're going to get on and do.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and welcome you to your place. Can I first of all really welcome both the ambition of my right honourable friend's statement and the details involved in it and those commitments. Let's get 2 points. In terms of the targets, and the Select Committee in the last Parliament said the targets had to be mandatory. If they aren't mandatory, many councils will simply choose to ignore them. But in mandatory targets, she gave an assurance that the targets will be based on a proper needs assessment of each local authority and will do away with the nonsensical and arbitrary urban uplifts which she referred to in the case of London. And secondly, in terms of social housing, and I was proud to be brought up in a council house like she was. In terms of social housing, will she work closely with local authorities and look particularly at land value capture? Where the planning permission for a site uplifts the value of that site, will she ensure that the total increase in value does not go to the landowners alone, but actually is used to benefit the public purse and reduce the cost of building those homes?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I can confirm that we are getting rid of the urban uplift, and the new method of housing targets is better than the previous one, because the previous one we believe was outdated, and figures, the urban uplift the figures were plucked from thin air. So we believe that this will give our new method would give councils stability and certainty to plan for their homes and local services they need. In terms of land value capture, again, this will come forward with more. There's a little bit within this consultation, but there's more within the planning and infrastructure bill that will come forward, as we spoke about in the King's speech.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I welcome you to your place. May I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for giving advance sight of her statement, and to associate myself and my party with her remarks about the devastating and senseless attacks in Southport. Our thoughts and prayers are with all those affected. Now, for too long under the Conservatives, we had a planning system that put developer greed over community need, a system which did not deliver the homes that we needed to tackle the crisis, but did destroy swathes of our green belt. But this statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, raises a lot of questions. So here we go. First of all, for those local authorities which are at an advanced stage of their draft local plans, will they need to start again with the new standard method, or can they continue? Secondly, for those local authorities that have recently conducted a green belt assessment, do they need to do it again under the new system, or will the current one stand? There seemed to be a conspicuous absence, Madam Deputy Speaker, of a particular target on social homes, not affordable homes, but on social homes. Will the Deputy Prime Minister take up the Liberal Democrat target of building 150,000 social homes every single year? We welcome the proposals by the government to review the compulsory purchase compensation. Will she take up the Liberal Democrat plan to put an end to land banking by reforming the Land Compensation Act so that local authorities can acquire land at a fair values? We welcome the review of the right to buy. Will the government allow local authorities to use that money to replace lost stock? The government indicated that it will be reviewing borrowing rules so that local authorities can borrow to invest. Will they allow local authorities to borrow to invest at a scale that will allow them to put an end to homelessness, overcrowding and housing register waiting lists? What powers and resources will they give to planning authorities so that they can enforce the requirement to put infrastructure first? Will they scrap the cap on developer planning fees? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the Greenbelt, there are some local authorities in the London Metropolitan Greenbelt area who, even when they have accounted for all of their brownfield sites and all of their grey belt sites, they still have to build thousands and thousands of homes on the Greenbelt, land which is supposed to be designed specifically to stop urban sprawl. Will the government put anything in the MPPF that will give any protection to the concept of Greenbelt at all? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you for those questions. In terms of local plans, it depends on where they're up to in terms of the direct question you asked, and there will be a transition, and we outline that within this consultation because we recognise areas have got quite far on. And in terms of where that's up to, it very much depends on what the difference is between what their local plan says and what we've asked, and we outline all of that in the consultation as well. We've been fair to those that have already done the work, so where that work has already been done, it's just about updating it and not disregarding where people already have local plans. But I say to the Honourable Lady that a third of areas have up-to-date local plans, so I would impress on all members of this House to speak to their local authorities to ensure that they have a local plan, because that is how we critically make sure that people feel engaged as part of that process, and we protect areas of Greenbelt and other areas by ending the speculative developments that we see. In terms of social homes numbers, again, I talked about the flexibility in the Affordable Homes Grant. There's stuff within the consultation here about the right to buy, which I recognise, and how the council and also housing associations can borrow to bring up their stock. I recognise the problem we face with the homelessness crisis, and it's something that I'm particularly keen to tackle. We also talk about the compulsory purchase orders, and again, we're doing a consultation on that because we think that that needs to be dealt with. We will also bring forward some of the other issues within our planning infrastructure bill. Planning will be strengthened. We've already announced 300 extra planners, local planners. We'll strengthen 106. We'll have an accelerator task force for those stalled plans, stalled sites that we have. And again, where there is a release of grey belt, they will be the golden rules that I outlined. So therefore, we will expect a lot from developers when they're in use of that. And also, we consult on fees as well within this consultation period. There is a lot within this consultation, but I believe that it will make a significant difference with engagement with local areas and to make sure that we meet the housing target that we need and that the country desperately deserves.
Rachel Hopkins.
Deputy Speaker, too many families are housed in substandard, overcrowded flats created through permitted development rights, such as former office block conversions. So will the Deputy Prime Minister give families in my constituency of Luton South and South Bedfordshire some hope for the future by confirming Labour's commitment to good quality, affordable family houses, including council houses, under her proposals?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and she's absolutely right. 14 years of the Tories have left social and affordable housing in a crisis, and this is to fix the overall problem that we've got with the housing crisis that we face. We have to have more social housing for rent, and I hear this. The right honourable lady opposite was talking about speaking to local councils, but members here, including new members, will know that their casework that comes through in their box already, their posts that they've seen, and their local leaders are saying what a desperate situation it is, and it's because of the supply problem, and it's because we need to fix the problem around social and affordable housing, and that's why we've got our golden rules. That's why we're going to strengthen 106 and expect the developers to do what they say they're going to do, and all of our departments are going to work to make sure that the infrastructure is there so people get the homes that they need locally and that they see the infrastructure that improves their local area and nature.
Desmond Swain.
New Forest District has its local plan recently agreed on the basis of a local housing need. When will it be required to reopen that assessment on the basis of her new algorithm and that target become mandatory?
Well, the short answer is when the next point when it updates. But as I said before in my answer to the honourable lady, those that have an up-to-date local plan won't be made to start again. So it's good, and I commend the honourable gentleman's local authority for having an up-to-date plan, because that is the best way to have consultation with your local area and provide the housing that local people need. And that's what this government wants to do, working with local leaders, working with mayors to make sure we deliver the houses that local people want and deal with the crisis that they face.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate my right honourable friend for making a superb statement. My right honourable friend knows that she will have strong support on these benches for building homes that she has identified that we particularly need in Liverpool to tackle homelessness, rising costs and the huge waiting lists for social housing. But councils will be reluctant to build if they know they will simply end up in the hands of private landlords who exploit the right to buy. So I welcome her review into the higher discounts imposed by the last government. And can she assure me that this will be a rapid review? Because with the mess that she's inherited, there is no time to waste in clearing this up.
I thank my right honourable friend for that question, and again, short answer is yes, it will be a rapid review. We've already been speaking about this even before the election, and we want to make sure that people take part in that review, but we're also very clear that the right to buy formula that the government set out in 2012, the discounts, means that councils just cannot replace the houses that are bought under the right to buy scheme. We believe that people should have the right to buy, but it has to be balanced against what the public give in discounts on our social housing stock and making sure that we can replace that stock for those that desperately need it.
Paul Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This announcement, quite frankly, will be a disaster for my Hamble Valley constituency. And in Hamble Valley, Liberal Democrat Eastleigh Borough Council has built over the last few years double the number of houses required by targets and assessments. So can the Secretary of State confirm that she will take into account retrospective building numbers for those areas who have already built more than their fair share? And why is she placing even more pressure on local services in the South East where house prices are the most expensive, but leaving cities alone and not increasing house numbers there too?
Well, I say to the honourable gentleman, they do increase. They do increase, and the new method that we'll be using is based upon what stock and also the affordability. So I ask the honourable member to look at the consultation on it, because what we want to do is be honest that if there is a particular shortage, and there's many areas that has a particular shortage, that we have to be building those homes. We stood on an election mandate to do that. Now, local plans, I don't know if the honourable gentleman's local authority has them. We will engage with them on that, but we do not have the homes that we desperately need. And I say to the honourable gentleman, engage with the local authority, get those local plans in place and work with us to build the houses that his constituents desperately need.
Yeah.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today, and particularly welcome the acknowledgement that where there are new developments on Greenbelt, that the facilities that go with them are so necessary. But can I ask the Secretary of State what steps should be taken to ensure that local communities can hold developers to account for the protection of our habitat and open spaces when they come forward with plans?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And Labour has a brownfield first policy, and within the outlines that we've put in the release of Greybelt, there are very strict golden rules on that, and we will be supporting local authorities with making sure that they have the best from 106 notices and that the golden rules apply. I actually think that the consultation that we put out today with the proposals for the national policy, the MPPF, the proposals that we're putting within the MPPF will actually strengthen the release instead of that haphazard way that we've seen it at the moment. And we'll also see the kind of homes that people desperately need in their areas that are affordable to them, including homes for social rent.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could the Secretary of State confirm two things? One, where local residents have complied with her coming mandatory targets through a neighbourhood plan rather than a local plan, that neighbourhood plan will reign supreme and will not be trampled over by planning inspectors subsequently. And secondly, that protected landscape, what used to be called an area of outstanding natural beauty, of which my constituency is 80%, but now called national landscape, that will also still be of significant protection within the planning system.
Yes, I can confirm that neighbourhood plans will remain, and also that the protections remain. I think it's really important, and again what we're saying in terms of the release of the Greybelt is that it has to be for the benefit of local natural spaces. We want to see areas where people can, within walking distance, have access. Many people do not have access to those areas. They're inaccessible on the Greenbelt, but we will be protecting, as we have always done, and there's no change to that, areas of natural beauty and parks, etc.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the new MP and former Cabinet Member for Housing of arguably Britain's most successful new town, Milton Keynes.
No way.
I welcome today's statement. It is exactly what we've needed to hear. The struggles and the conflicts that we've had trying to deliver the housing that people in Milton Keynes need has been enormous and a real waste of resource, to be quite frank. But we need not to only build new houses, but to build new communities. Will she meet with me and Milton Keynes City Council so we can discuss how we can help deliver this essential mission so that everyone has a place to call home?
Well, can I welcome the member for Milton Keynes to her place? I've visited Milton Keynes quite a number of times, and what a fantastic example of a Labour new town. And I think the honourable member has already been quite pithy in getting a meeting arranged with my housing minister, and I look forward to hearing more about how we can learn from Milton Keynes and have the next generation of new towns coming forward.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to welcome the consultation on the National Planning Policy Framework. One of the documents that was circulated to colleagues today was an MPPF with track changes. And buried on page 55, there's a footnote that says that this following sentence is proposed for deletion. The availability of agricultural land used for food production should be considered when deciding what sites are most appropriate for development. That's in the existing MPPF. It is proposed that that's taken out. The UK is only 60% self-sufficient for food, down from the mid-80s when we were 78% self-sufficient. Is the government taking enough account of self-sufficiency in food?
Yes, and we believe that it's already considered within the MPPF, and there's already guidance on agriculture land as well, and in particular high-grade agricultural land. So we believe the protections are already in there in terms of food.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to congratulate the Deputy Prime Minister on her statement today. Slightly disappointed with some of the comments from the Conservative benches, but I hope the Deputy Prime Minister will reject them as the British people rejected them on the 4th of July. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, like the Deputy Prime Minister, I am fortunate enough, like most people who have a mayor in England, to live under a Labour mayor. Will the Deputy Prime Minister work with me, work with Labour mayors, including her own and my own, and councillors and members of this place, to ensure that we get the right kind of developments in the right places?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he's absolutely right, because what we're trying to achieve today, and the legislation we'll be bringing forward as announced in the King's Speech, is about how we strengthen local consultation. I've already said to members that only a third of local authorities have up-to-date local plans. So this is a wake-up call to say, as part of local planning and having local plans in place, there is an obligation to consult and then consult again on the final plan. So many people who are frustrated by housing that goes up is because of this speculative development, because there hasn't been that engagement. So what we're proposing today, and we've already met with mayors, we've met with council leaders, this is a push that has come not just from local leaders and mayors, but from the voters. I believe that's why we won as large as we did at the general election, because people want to see that change. So we know that that engagement has to continue. We know that we have to work with local leaders and mayors to make this plan a reality, and we're going to work with them to make sure that we get those homes and we get the infrastructure and that we get the next generation of social and affordable housing that the people of this country need.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and good luck in your new role. It is possible to have successful development, but from experience, it has to be something that you do with people and not to people. This is the latter. These pernicious top-down targets have the practical effect at ground level of setting one town against another, one village against another, and one local community against another. And given the Chancellor's statement on public spending yesterday, who will pay for the tens of billions of pounds of infrastructure that would be required to make all of this work? All experience shows that on development and house building, the man or the woman in Whitehall really does not know best. Yeah. Why then are you going back to the old, failed way of doing it, which will not work?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
I mean, I'm shocked that to tell the honourable member, but that the MPPF was an MPPF before we took government as well. So national targets have always been there. It's not something that I've dreamt up. But the important thing, is our new method is clearly based upon what the housing stock and the affordability and the need in their area. This is a need that has created a housing crisis in this country, and that is why the electorate elected the Labour government on the mandate that we did, because we said we are going to fix the housing crisis that we've inherited. And I would say that this is again about local plans. I implore the honourable member to get with his local authority, to get a local plan, to engage with local people and to listen to those that are waiting desperately, probably the thousands in his constituency, desperate for a home that they know will never come.
Joe White. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My local authority has just agreed its local plan during the general election, and it was the first authority in the country to commit Section 106 funds to our local hospital. As Deputy Leader, I was very proud to lead on this. I see Section 106 funding as the most effective method of mitigating against the impacts of development and bringing in much needed funding for infrastructure. How does the Deputy Prime Minister envision how Section 106 funding can be reformed to make it a far more effective method of bringing in the infrastructure spending? Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, can I congratulate the honourable member, not just for her getting to this place, but also for the work she did previously, and also congratulate the local authority for the work they've done on having a local plan, and also that making sure that they did get what they needed out of the Section 106. And she's absolutely right to say that it's important, because those health needs, whether it's GP services, hospitals, schools, or whatever the infrastructure is, Section 106 plays a very important role, and it needs to be strengthened. We talk about it in here a little bit. We talk about the golden rules that we will apply if Grey Belt is released, but we'll be working with our department to ensure that local authorities are given the resources they need and the expertise from here, so that we can make sure that they get the best out of 106 notices.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thousands of new homes are planned in Kings Lynn in my constituency, but that development requires transport and other infrastructure. So will the Secretary of State work with the Transport Secretary and the Chancellor to unlock the funding for the A10 West Winch Housing Access Road so that development can proceed?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, again, there is a challenge that we have inherited, and I hope that the honourable member's area has got a local plan when it comes to what they're requiring, and therefore they can push for part of their infrastructure as part of their Section 106. So I'll happily engage through the Minister on that particular issue, but I'm wondering whether the honourable member was in the chamber yesterday and realised what the mess his government left us in.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome you to your new place. Can I start by thanking the Deputy Prime Minister for the speed at which she and her fantastic team are tackling the housing crisis. It is welcome news in Luton North, where my surgeries have been consistently full of people struggling in overcrowded housing, facing skyrocketing rents for substandard conditions. And we have daily cases of people subjected to eviction notices through no fault of their own. Does she agree with me that the government's new plans to build genuinely affordable housing and for this council house revolution to start can't come soon enough for towns like mine?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I think she articulates what many members across the House, even members opposite, will recognise in terms of the challenges that we face. And this issue has been ducked for 14 years by the Conservatives, and in fact it went backwards because of the changes they made to the MPPF in last year. And that's why we're making absolutely no bones about the fact that we do mean to deliver, and that's why this consultation is so important and why we've put that out there now. And I say to honourable members, we do intend to move at pace. People who are in temporary accommodation, 150,000 children that haven't got a home to call their home. I think about that every single night and think there isn't a day that we can afford to waste in terms of dealing with that situation for them. And I promise them across your constituency and everybody else's that I'll do everything I can to make sure that they have a home.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now then, I welcome the news of the council house revolution. And we all know that the Deputy Prime Minister is a little bit of an expert when it comes to council housing. But can she confirm that priority will be given to British families, veterans and pensioners?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, we have confirmed that people with a local connection will get priority in those homes. But I also say to the honourable gentleman who tries to make a quip about the fact that I grew up in a council house, is that the situation that I hear, and when I took on this brief, is that actually people used to talk about my childhood as if I grew up in poverty, but there's many kids today that if they got a council house, it would be considered they'd won the lottery. Those children today can't have that. So we will build the homes. We will prioritise that people locally can get them, and we'll make sure that first-time buyers get first dibs as well. There's a number of measures that we're putting in place to make sure that the homes that are built are there for the people that need it.
Ben Goldsborough.
Deputy Speaker, residents in Heatherset, Mulbarton and Loddon have sadly had all their fingers burnt by the old planning policies that were in place from the previous government. Can you give me assurances that going forward the Section 106 will be strengthened to ensure that public good, public infrastructure will be in place to make sure that our new housing is accessible for everyone and gives them the resources they need to live a very happy life?
Deputy Prime Minister.
There is parts of this consultation which does look at how we can strengthen 106, and we want to do that in conjunction with local authorities. We are also bringing forward at a later date through this Parliament, which I mentioned in my statement, about strategic planning and also the planning and infrastructure bill. So this is the start of a process, but we know there's a lot more to do, and I look forward to your engagement with that.
Wendy Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So, I'm no NIMBY, but today what we're seeing is a lurch back to top-down mandatory targets that will ride roughshod through local communities like those that I represent across Aldridge Brownhills and local decision-making. I do agree with the Deputy Prime Minister, though, when she says that the first port of call must be brownfield land. So can she confirm that she will do this by giving full financing to brownfield land remediation and reclamation?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, we think we can better use brownfield funding, but I say to the honourable member that it's not riding roughshod over local decisions and what local people want, because having mandatory housing targets and plans means that people will be able to decide. What we're saying and what we said at the general election is that we will build 1.5 million homes. We said that really clear, and we have a mandate to do that. We think the new method for housing targets works better. We think it will deliver for people, including the affordability test, and therefore we will deliver the houses that her constituency needs, and I would encourage her to engage with that process with her local authority.
I am planning to end this statement around 20 past, sir. Could you please help each other by keeping questions short? I call Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This has to be the most important statement I've heard since being in the House, and York has really suffered with the proliferation of luxury accommodation, second homes and short-term holiday lets. So I welcome this so much. Could she say what steps can be taken for plans, developers currently with plans in the system, so that we can pivot to ensure that we hit the targets that we need for having the affordable and social housing we desperately need right now?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I absolutely agree with the honourable lady that we do need to have these affordable homes that we desperately need, and that's why, depending on where her local authority is in the process, we'll be setting out those targets which are likely to be increased for her local area, and for them to engage in that process. The golden rules are there, which will again allow more affordability where there is a restrictive release of grey belt, and also that we will ensure that we help and support on the affordability and making sure there isn't a gaming of the system, so that we get the best that we can out of Section 106.
Andrew George.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I strongly endorse the sentiment and purpose of the Deputy Prime Minister's statement and policy statement today. She's aware that the planning system is, as others have said, fuelled by greed rather than need. And in a place like Cornwall, which is not NIMBY, it's one of the fastest growing places in the United Kingdom. It's almost trebled its housing stock in the last 60 years, and yet the housing problems of local people have got worse. So my question to the Deputy Prime Minister is that house building targets are a means to an end, and surely it would be far better in places like Cornwall that those targets be set on addressing the need rather than simply allowing developers to fill their boots.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and that's what the new formula does. What we're trying to do is assess the need for areas, and in particular on what their current stock is, taking account of that, but also about affordability. And I suspect Cornwall has a particular challenge with that as well. But what we're hoping to do as part of this as well is strengthen the plans on Section 106, the new Homes Accelerator Task Force, which will help get those sites that have already got planning permission moving forward. And by working across Whitehall, we'll go about to deliver the infrastructure that people want as well, because that is the other big issue that keeps coming back, is where we have speculative sites or release of greenbelt, or where there is big housing in an area, that the infrastructure is incredibly critical to that point, and that's what we need to overcome, and that's what we're clear that we need to do as a government.
Helena Dollimore.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in my constituency of Hastings and Rye, we are at the sharp end of the housing crisis, and we desperately need more affordable and more council homes. So I really welcome today's statement. The party opposite may behave like this is a zero-sum game between building more desperately needed homes and protecting the environment, but we on this side know that is not the case. So can I ask my right honourable friend what this new government's approach will be to ensure we have sustainable development, protecting our environment and making sure we have the infrastructure, including sewage pipes, and preventing flooding while building the homes that my constituents so desperately need?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her question and also welcome her to her place. And she's absolutely right, and it builds on the question that I answered previously, that we have to protect our green belt, and we think the proposals that we're putting forward does that. But it also means that we have the right type of homes and we have the infrastructure, and that also that as part of this process that there will be nature considerations and the rules around that, there is the infrastructure that people need, and that there is access to the countryside and healthy living. There's a number of factors within the consultation that the honourable lady can look at, which will talk about how we're delivering better, greener areas for people, which hopefully her constituents will be able to get behind.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's good to see you in that chair. I'm not sure whether the Secretary of State has discussed her proposals with the Secretary of State for Agriculture or the National Farmers Union, but the answer that she gave earlier in relation to food production was risible. What she's actually announced today is effectively a recipe for disposing of the land that will be needed to feed our children and our grandchildren. Yeah. And just before she goes ahead with this, could she tell the House how many planning consents have been granted, are sitting there unbuilt out, and shouldn't we be using those first?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Who was in charge?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, but I really do, with absolute respect, say to the honourable gentleman, please read the consultation, because we do think that we do support our agriculture, which is around just over 10% of the land that we have, and we will make sure there's best and most versatile. And I talked before about protecting the land that is of best value, and we will do that. And the land that we're talking about, grey belt, which we define within the MPPF consultation, is not agricultural land. It's disused garages and it's other things of that nature, not, as the honourable gentleman wants people to believe, the land that we need for food.
Yeah. Olivia Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Deputy Prime Minister's twin ambitions set out today to get Britain building, to provide the homes that we need, and to make sure that we have the infrastructure required to support them, like schools and GP surgeries. These are of equal importance, and you cannot have one without the other. Can she confirm that the aim of her package on social and affordable housing is to go net positive, so that the number of social rent homes is rising rather than falling, and achieve it in the first year of this Parliament?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I welcome the honourable lady to her place, and within the first, it is going to be a challenge, but we're absolutely desperate to try and meet that challenge as quickly as we can. That's why we're moving at pace with the consultation exercise that we've put forward today, and we will do that as quickly as we possibly can, so we can make sure that we are making the affordable and social housing we need, as well as making sure that we have the green spaces in the infrastructure that people desperately need as well.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you. Welcome to the Chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, and welcome to the Honourable Lady to her new role. I appreciate that she won't have time to wax lyrical today about our vision of aesthetics, nor to extend at length on the relationship between truth and beauty. Nevertheless, given the welcome reference in her announcement about proportionality and the link between the existing built environment and the scale of development, will she also take into account the character and style of development? She may know that I've served on the Building Beautiful Commission and the Office for Place. Will she agree to meet the Office for Place to discuss beauty? For she will know that the wealthy can always live in beautiful places, in beautiful homes, but that people from council houses, as she and I originate, deserve their chance to know, to sense and to see beauty.
To Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his comments, and I absolutely agree with everything that he says, and I know the Minister will be meeting shortly with all of stakeholders, and I think he's got a meeting with those that you've just mentioned as well in the coming days. But I would love to work with the Honourable Gentleman to make sure that we build the houses that people deserve, whether those social, affordable housing or any other housing. They should be beautiful, they should have character and style, and we're determined to make that happen.
Now Shabar Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I also thank my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, for her statement and the focus that she has rightly given to the delivery of genuinely affordable homes, which will provide much needed housing security to many of my constituents in Gillingham and Raynham. But recognising some of the immediate homelessness challenges felt by local authorities, can she detail how the plans she has announced today relieve pressures on homelessness and temporary accommodation?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and she's absolutely right to talk about homelessness and the pressures that local authorities face, and it's this issue in particular that I feel quite personal about, because the amount of stories I've heard, not just since I've been in the shadow role as previously, but in the role that I am fortunate and humbled enough to have now, is that we cannot continue with the homelessness crisis. Behind every single one of those figures is a human being, and it really does have an impact like poverty does. Housing has a significant impact on people's lives and opportunities, and that's why, as Deputy Prime Minister and in my role, we'll be bringing different leaders together, a local and regional and here, to make sure that we can really tackle homelessness, because we need to do something about those figures. We've inherited a really poor state of affairs, and I'm determined to make sure that we do something about that.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister for her statement. Residents in my constituency of Waveney Valley, as in so much of the country, are finding that many of them are being priced out of being able to live in their local community. The homes that are being built are just not affordable to local people. So I welcome the statements today on affordable housing, but could the Deputy Prime Minister set out, of the 1.5 million homes that she's pledged to build, how many does she expect to be affordable, and in particular how many does she expect to be council homes? And could she also set out what action will be taken to address the fact that we have 1 million empty homes in this country?
To Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his comment. It's really difficult to set out in detail at a particular local level, because it's subject to obviously Section 106 and the type of development. That's why local plans are really important, and us supporting that. But I would refer him to the consultation document on, for example, the release of Grey Belt, which talks about a minimum of 50% of affordable. And again, that depends upon what local need is. You have to try and get the balance right, because if local areas are saying we need X, and then I say, well, you're going to have Y, then that's a challenge. But what we have said is that if the Grey Belt is released, that 50% must be affordable. That can be chosen by the local area. If they say, I want a particular amount of social rents, that they can put that in there. And I would say that, again, looking at the document, looking at the methodology that we're using, I think, and looking at the affordability test, I think that makes things much better in terms of giving a number and a figure that reflects the realities of people in the local area.
Alistair Strathern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I too welcome you to your place.
The Deputy Prime Minister will be all too aware the extent to which the current planning system is failing communities like mine. Not building the affordable homes people are crying out for, not delivering the infrastructure my growing communities need, and not even protecting some of the most nature-rich parts of our countryside. Because while the opposition benches might not like to hear this, under the last government, greenbelt approvals, often haphazard, increased tenfold, while brownfield approvals halved. Yeah. Will the Deputy Prime Minister reassure my constituents that her golden rules will ensure brownfield and greyfield sites are truly prioritised and infrastructure and affordability is prioritised too, to finally deliver growth that works for communities like mine?
Yeah. Deputy Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to mention the haphazard way in which the Green Belt has been built upon under the last government. You'd think that it never happened in some of the responses I've had back from the opposite side of the chamber. But I'm clear that brownfield should always be the first port of call, and that's why we've been making brownfield development easier within the MPPF, and that we'll also be taking firm action to limit the scope of gaming and consulting on how to stop developments who have paid over the odds for land, using that as an excuse for negotiating their Section 106 contributions down. So there's a number of measures, including our golden rules, that will make sure, hopefully, we push towards brownfield and that the release of grey belt has to be within our golden rules.
Ben Opsijecti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, the Secretary of State and Minister made the decision to approve the appeal made by Envar Composting in relation to the proposed medical waste incinerator on the edge of St Ives, despite the rejection of the initial application by the Conservatives and Labour on Cambridgeshire County Council. Local residents in St Ives, as well as the impacted rural villages of Somersham, Bluntisham, Colne, Pidley, Woodhurst, Oldhurst and Needingworth, are hugely concerned that their opposition and concerns have not been heard by the Secretary of State. So given NHS England's 2023 clinical waste strategy states a need to reduce the use of incineration and details a strategic priority that requires in-house waste processing capability to be developed, why has the Secretary of State approved a medical waste incinerator against local wishes, and will she meet with local residents to hear their concerns?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his contribution, and in the specific case I've not dealt with it myself personally, but what I can say to you is that when making those decisions, we weigh up the advice and the planning expertise that we have in there, and those decisions will be made based upon that evidence that we have. It's an objective way of making a decision.
Will you meet local residents?
Noah Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Deputy Prime Minister's plan to put building homes at the heart of our mission to raise living standards and also to ensure that what we build reflects local views. Will she give an update on our plans to give councils greater powers to tackle the scourge of second homes that, particularly in Cornwall, put a drag not just on our community but our economy as well, so that we can unlock supply through this channel?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that contribution, and like I said in the opening statement today, this is the first steps. We know there's so much more that we need to do. We've got a significant amount of legislation coming forward, which the Housing Minister will be able to update the House on going forward. But this MPPF is about particular making sure we get the housing targets, but I understand the point that the member's making, and we need to address many more issues that we face in housing, and that's why we had significant amounts of it in the King's speech.
Sir John Whittingdale.
There are currently an additional 3,000 homes being built in Malden and Heybridge in my constituency, and the Liberal Democrat-controlled Chelmsford wants to build another 3,000 at Hammond's Farm in my constituency. Yet the local roads, health services, education services are all under intolerable pressure. So what will the Secretary of State do to ensure that necessary infrastructure is put in place before these developments take place?
Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, the honourable gentleman will know that his government was in government for 14 years and could have resolved this, and this is part of the reason why we're consulting on the revised MPPF, because we recognise, and I've said to many honourable members in the chamber today, that infrastructure is critical, that people often reject the housing proposals because they don't see sufficient infrastructure. That's why we have the golden rules. That's why I've asked all of the departments to look at what we can do to make sure that that infrastructure is there, and that's why we'll support strengthening of Section 106 to make sure that developers don't try and squeeze out of what they were promised as part of that development.
Emma Foodie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As my right honourable friend has said, this has got to be about building communities, not just about building homes. But on too many occasions in my constituency, residents have been left for too long on incomplete and unadopted estates. So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree that both the social and physical infrastructure must be delivered at the earliest opportunity in developments, and that developers must be held to account for the delivery of this?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I absolutely agree, and it goes back again to the point that far too often is the objections to development is because people don't see the infrastructure, and people see that in some cases developers try and wriggle out of their obligations. As I said and set out in the consultation document we're putting forward today, is that we believe that it will strengthen local authorities' hands, and that we'll be able to make sure that we get that infrastructure that we desperately need alongside those houses.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister has outlined the need for house building and the dire need that there is across the Great United Kingdom, and set out a system to try and achieve that. However, one of the things that's really important is those people who are trying to get mortgages. For instance, here in the mainland here, those who have earned £75,000 a year are having difficulty getting a mortgage. Those back home in Northern Ireland who probably are earning much less, say 40, 45,000, have no chance of getting a mortgage. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister this question: what can be done to help people get mortgages and thereby be able to buy a home and move forward? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend, I'll say, for his contribution today. And he's absolutely right that we've got to fix the situation, not just on affordability, so those houses come forward. We spoke in the general election, and we'll be bringing proposals forward for a mortgage guarantee scheme. But hopefully the New Deal for Working People, which is coming forward with the legislation in October time, to make sure that we make work pay. And the Chancellor announced again for public sector workers pay rise, and we recently wrote to the Low Pay Commission to expand their remit, so we'll make sure that over 1 million people will get a pay rise, because jobs that pay will also mean that people can then afford to have their own home.
We now come to the statement from the Foreign Secretary.